Welcome to Higher PhD's ACPSS YouTube series. I'm Divya and I'm the project manager at Higher PhD. Higher PhD is a non-profit organization which aims to help advanced degree holders by providing them necessary resources for a successful career transition. I'm very excited to be the moderator for today's ACPSS episode. ACPSS is short for Alternative Career Path Success Stories, which aims to expose our audience to the numerous career possibilities outside academia. ACPSS is one of the numerous initiatives by Higher PhD to help advanced degree holders unlock their potential and navigate career paths. So please stay with us till the end of the video and enjoy this conversation. So today we have a very special guest with us, Elissa Gurman. Elissa is a principal at MacPhie, which is a boutique management consultancy based in Toronto, where she specializes in organizational development, strategic planning, and inclusive communication. Elissa earned her PhD in English literature from the University of Toronto, her diversity, equity, and inclusion certificate from Cornell University, and her change management practitioner certificate from Prosci. She was recently named one of the Peak's Emerging Leaders in People and Culture for 2024. When she's not working with leaders on their complex business challenges, she enjoys reading, cooking, and spending time with her husband and two young children. Welcome again, Elissa. We are thrilled to have you as our guest today.
Thank you so much for having me today.
So, could you just start off by telling something about yourself and about your academic background and how it transitioned to your career journey?
Okay, it's a story. So I have my PhD in English. I specialized in 19th century novels. Before that, I did a master's in English and a bachelor's in English. So I studied literature the whole way. And when it came time to finish my PhD, it was becoming increasingly clear that unless I was willing to make pretty major sacrifices to my personal life, I wasn't going to be pursuing an academic career path. So things just start to change, right? Like I moved around from my master's and PhD. And after that, I didn't want to move anymore, right? I was married. I wanted to have that part of my life. I wanted to have a family, own a house maybe, and just have that grounded, stable part of my life start. And I began to see from my peers in upper years that in order to pursue academia, especially in English, you have to be willing to move a bunch, to take jobs in what were to me undesirable locations, very far from family, very far from major centers. So I started looking pretty early, thinking I'm going to have to do something else. And I had no idea what that something else might be. So, I mean, I had worked throughout my entire PhD part-time, both within academia and teaching and also well outside of it. And I had thought maybe that would help me to find a job, but it really didn't. I must have applied to 45 jobs, got one interview and no offers. And the non-academic jobs. And so I was graduating and feeling pretty down on myself when I finally did the thing I should have done from the beginning, which was ask my friends for help. So one thing I did during my PhD, which was smart but not intentional, was that I had friends outside of the PhD. So when I finished my PhD and I was 30, I had friends who were directors at major companies, right? Like who had careers. So I swallowed my pride and asked somebody for help. I said, I can't find a job. And a friend of mine got me an internship at his company, which at the time was sort of mortifying to me because it was an internship for new grads. And I don't think they meant PhD. So I was in a cohort of 20 interns, all of whom were 10 years younger than me, more or less, and students I would have been teaching a month before. And everybody thought I was their age, which was really funny because I did not look their age. And I also was pregnant. I didn't tell anybody, but I was when I started the internship. So I interned there for a summer, and it was really, really a turning point for me. I learned a ton about business, about how business works, and I just networked my butt off because there's nothing like a 9-month deadline to make you try to find a job before you start showing. So there was a frantic energy happening there. In the summer that I interned there, I kept a little notebook with all the people that I met for coffee. And I met with over 35 different people for coffee in that summer, trying so hard to just find my way to a role before I was showing. I interviewed a whole bunch. it was really funny. There was one job in the company. I went for my first interview, wasn't showing at all. Great. Second interview, like maybe I ate a burrito. It was okay. By the time the third interview came, it took them so long. The interviewer was just like, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. Like, you're clearly pregnant. So I didn't get any work come out of that. But what did happen was someone that I met, not even through one of those networking coffee dates, I had done this thing called a walk a mile, where you can, within this organization, you could shadow anyone you want for a full day. So I did multiples of those while I was there. And on one of my walk a miles, someone was in the same boardroom as me. I don't even remember speaking to them. He reached out to me through the intranet channel or whatever. And he said, my wife works in consulting. I think you should meet her. And I really didn't even remember meeting this person. And so I went and I met with his wife, who worked at the time at MacPhie, which is where I am now. And they didn't even have it at a job posting. She just really liked me. But it was very funny because I walk into the cafe, and this is what some men are like. I'm like 9 months pregnant. I'm enormous at this point. And he had not told her. So she was thinking like, ooh, someone's smart who maybe I could hire right now. And I walk in and she just goes, oh, but she really liked me and we really connected, and we stayed in touch throughout my mat leave, and they hired me. MacPhie hired me as soon as I finished my mat leave, and I've been there ever since. I started at the bottom and I worked my way all the way up to the top. And that is kind of the story of how I got from where I was to where I am.
Oh my God, you're making me tear up.
Nice.
Thank you so much, first of all, for sharing this, because it was really personal and not easy. It's not straightforward. It was not straightforward for you. So could you dwell a bit deeper into what prompted or what inspired your decision to transition from academia to industry? What was the turning point?
Was really thinking about all the parts of my life. I loved academia in a lot of ways. It's not perfect like everything, but I loved teaching. I'm very, very passionate about teaching. I loved my research, but I think there's more to life than work. I really, truly do. And I believe that still right now. And I wasn't going to be able to have the life that I wanted with that career. And it was not worth it to me. And I saw that very clearly. And I know a lot of people talk about having a mourning period after finishing. I did not. Like, to me, it just, I guess I'm quite practical in a lot of ways, despite having done a PhD in English. It just made absolutely no sense. It was not going to work out. And so I actually was not sad, and I did not really miss it. I just kind of moved on. There was no way my husband was going to come with me all over wherever I had to go to follow that path. And I would not make him do it. So it was really clear. And not because he doesn't support me, because he's a lawyer. He can't practice law for 2 years here, 2 years there. You have to recertify every time. It's actually impossible. I would have to ask him to sacrifice everything he's worked for what? So I can make 50 grand a year as a postdoc? No. I think I say this often, academia eats its young, and I wasn't about to be eaten. There was no way.
So you just made a practical decision, which I cannot imagine how difficult it would have been for you as well as your family, because you were already married by that time, and any decision you took would affect not only you, but your family too. So
Yeah.
what were some of the challenges that you encountered at that time when you were transitioning?
People do not take you seriously when you have a PhD. It was really very funny when I was interning. Everyone would I once had someone introduce me. They're like, "Oh, and this is our intern, Elissa. She has an MBA." MBA, but they had no idea what a PhD was, like zero clue. And to them, they're like, "Oh, she has a fancy degree." That's what they remembered. And so they would just say MBA, which, trust me, would be better for me if I did. I still encounter barriers like that. So I'm a principal now at this firm, which is as high as I can get. I've been doing this work for 5 years, and I still have clients who are very doubtful that I can deliver the work because I have a PhD in English specifically. Where if I get assigned to a project, sometimes people will go to the boss and say, "Are you sure that this is the right person for this project?" So people don't understand what's involved in a PhD, especially in the arts. People are very skeptical of you. They think you're going to be very elitist or inaccessible or hard to understand or detached from the real world. When I interviewed for this job that I have now, one of my interviewers said to me, I don't know how to say this, but we deal with money. Are you comfortable with that? They would not have said that to me if I didn't have a PhD in English, right? And
Yeah.
I was not very nice looking back. I said, I'll be fine. I pay rent. I live in the world. I understand how to deal with money. And they still hired me. But you will encounter stuff like that, especially moving from the arts to business. People think you are going to be, quite frankly, useless and obnoxious. Um,
So, what are the differences that you found between academia and industry that you have experienced firsthand during your academic journey and now that you're working in the industry?
the biggest learning curve for me was in academia, you kind of have the boldness beat out of you, not to use like a violent image, but I was quite a bold person. I spoke my mind for a period of time. I had ideas and I asserted them. And I think through academia, you learn not to do that. Don't do that. You can't say that. Did you actually check all your sources? Have you cited everyone who's ever written about this topic? Because otherwise you can't. And even then, you should say might or possibly or could. That kind of tentativeness does not serve you well in business, especially in consulting. People are expecting you to come in with expertise and with a point of view, and people are expecting you to be assertive relatively quickly with a relatively limited data set. And so I learned pretty quickly that I had to, which was good for me, go back to a more natural tendency of just like asserting my point of view. And if I'm wrong, it's okay, but I need to have a point of view. I can't just sit in the wings and read for an hour, a year before I come out and have an opinion. And so for me, that was a massive difference. You don't need to have all of the evidence in the world to put forth a suggestion or a possibility in industry. In fact, no one expects you to have all the evidence in the world. They expect you to have just enough evidence to make an informed recommendation. So that was the biggest thing I noticed. Also, there's so much more collaboration, right? In English, other PhDs, there's collaboration involved. In English, there really isn't at all. So for me, that was easy and fun, but I was so grateful for it. I didn't realize how lonely I was until I left academia. It's nice to be on a team. It's nice to have people have different roles within a project and not have yourself own everything. It's nice to have relationships with your coworkers. So that's a big difference, but one that I found very beneficial.
Oh, sounds like you had very different experiences in academia and in the industry that you're serving right now. So I'm pretty sure that while you were going through your master's and your PhD, you must have gained a lot of different skills that usually people from non-academic or a non-PhD background won't understand it or won't see it. So what are those skills, the academic skills that you leveraged, and what knowledge from your PhD that helped you in this new industry role?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say it's entirely skills and none knowledge. All of my knowledge from my PhD was related to 19th century England. Totally and completely irrelevant. Whenever I try to bring it in, people actually think I'm very weird. So sometimes I was writing a speech for a CEO about whatever, someone in retail. It was like related to shopping. And I was like, oh my God, we should talk about the Crystal Palace, the first ever shopping that ever happened in the 19th century in a mall type setting. And my boss was like, no, that is not going in the speech. So no, none of the specific knowledge, I'd say zero. But the skills, yes, 100%. So through my PhD, I learned how to gather, understand, and synthesize vast amounts of information. That is a big component of consulting. In the PhD, I learned how to design courses and teach. That's a big part of the consulting I do when it comes to leadership development. So I get to use that all of the time. And the written communication skills. My ability to write and at this stage edit reports has set me in a really strong position in this job and is highly, highly valued by my colleagues and my boss, and has actually made my boss, who has rarely hired art students, more keen to hire art students after seeing the way that we can write.
using your writing skills that really helped you in this current job, which I think is a special talent that you had. You knew how to transfer this skill, your love for writing, your unique ability to understand, to analyze, as you mentioned, and then transfer it into such a role. I mean, it's impeccable. So, what strategies or resources did you find most helpful in navigating this transition successfully?
Honestly, there was nothing formal. I think you have to listen and assess. Every workplace and every career has norms, whether those are cultural norms or work type norms. And most people who do a PhD are pretty smart. So, like, listen, pay attention, see what gets rewarded and what doesn't, what's how people do things and what's not. I don't think I used any strategies or resources once I switched into the role beyond being very attuned to what's going on around me, getting up to speed as quickly as possible because people are skeptical of you when you have a background like this and you want to start demonstrating value pretty quickly so that because you know you're there because someone went on a limb. You're not the candidate they were looking for. So somebody said, no, I believe in this person. And it was my goal to make that person not a fool, right? And so I'm going to listen, I'm going to learn, and I'm going to demonstrate value as fast as I can. I don't really think there were any resources that I referred to.
Okay, so no formal resources. It was just totally based on your soft skills. And I would like to highlight your analytical brain.
Just like pay
That,
attention, right? So
sure. So, were there any unexpected benefits or opportunities that arose from transitioning to industry?
I think it was all in line with what I had anticipated. One thing that I tell PhD students, so I go back every year to my English department and talk to PhD students about transitioning to business. And I talk about the perception that industry or business is like big, bad, immoral, does not care about you impersonal. I do. Industry can be caring because if they lose you, they lose money. Um, there's a real cost to a lack of retention. Now, of course, there's mass layoffs, there's big changes, there's all those things that happen, and it's true. Organizations can be very heartless, but so sometimes organizations will care for you more. They'll have better mental health supports, they'll have better benefits, they'll have better employee resource groups. I guess that's something that I've taken away from those PhD sessions, communicating to the students that industry does not have to be heartless. And there are some really great leaders and really great structures put in place so that you can feel a sense of belonging and purpose in the work that you do.
That's a really great point that you presented. So, on the same note, you mentioned that when you talk to PhD, they they have a very rosy picture of how a professor's life starts and how comfortable it is and how the university cares about them. So, did you face any skepticism or resistance from either your academic peers or industrial professionals regarding your transition? And how did you handle it, all the skepticism?
So in my class of 18 PhD grads, only one person got an academic job that I know of. So I'd say no. People are just happy for me that I have a job. People are excited for me that I've found something that I like. I have not faced resistance. I faced some during the PhD with some peers who were, oh, the work you do is so popular. That's so nice. Like snide remarks like that. But no, everybody struggled when they graduated. So it's not weird. And frankly, after I graduated, I was only talking to the people who I liked anyways.
That's a good strategy.
Anyone who was going to give negative comments about the career path, there was zero reason for me to talk to them. But that makes it sound defensive. Really, all of us had no job. So why would anybody be judgmental?
That makes sense. That makes sense. So, since you transitioned into an industrial role that is not related to what you majored in your PhD or what you studied throughout your your grad school. Can you discuss the role of networking and professional relationships in facilitating your transition to industry?
I think networking is the only way to do it. I think people will tell you there's ways to reframe your resume and you can get different qualifications. As soon as you have that PhD in English literature on your resume, people think you're weird. I promise you they do. Um, and so the only way to overcome that is through networking. On paper, I can tell you this because I hire now. And we're a very small firm. We're not well known everywhere. People are chomping at the bit to get that job here. And we post a job and we get 200 applicants. Why would somebody look at an unconventional candidate? They have no reason to. They have 50 candidates on paper who were what they were expecting and looking for. I think the only way to get considered is through networking. Oh, I met that person. I thought they were really great. Oh, my friend told me about that person. We should give them an interview. It is too competitive to do it without networking. I think that's the only reason I have this job. I think that's the only reason I'm in this career path. Because I met somebody who took a chance on me, who saw something in me and gave me that chance. And I think that's how people do it all the time, even if they're not an unconventional applicant. Like I said, 200 people applying for a single role. How do you stand out? Either you have exactly the experience we want, you've worked at a competitor and we're dying to know how they do it, or you have an in, quite frankly, or you're just really, I don't know, a really good writer. Sometimes that's what I'm looking for. I think networking is essential.
I think you are one of those rare PhDs who have understood the importance of networking. Usually PhDs they have more resistance towards networking as compared to the non-PhD. So this is something I think that's why like you are special. You knew exactly what you want and you were scared to follow through the steps because networking for a lot of people it might not be a very comfortable thing to do. You definitely have to step out of your comfort zone to ask for help.
I remember when we were doing our professional skills course in our PhD, which was like teaching us how to get an academic job. I raised my hand and I said, well, what about networking? And everyone was horrified. You don't network to get an academic job. It's based on merit alone. And I was just like, sorry, I asked. But my experience with friends in other fields is that networking is a big part of most people's job search.
Thank you so much for sharing this, like raw, unfiltered emotions of a grad student. Because yeah, this is important for other high degree holders to know that networking is normal in industries, and that's how you learn things about that industry. You can't just be always blindly applying to roles and thinking that maybe someone will pick up a resume and call us. So thank you so much for sharing this. Really appreciate it. Looking back, is there any advice you wish you had received or any actions you would have taken differently during your transition?
I would have started networking sooner. I felt really crummy applying to lots of jobs and getting no traction. I felt really embarrassed. I felt like, how did I get here? Age 30, unemployed. Like, it was a bad feeling. And I think if I would have started networking earlier or even asking for help earlier, I would have found something sooner and not had that like purgatory feeling. Um, I would have been kinder to myself in taking an internship. I was very embarrassed to take a minimum wage internship with a bunch of 20-year-olds. I was. And I guess I would have gone back and told myself it's going to pay off. Don't worry. Don't feel so anxious. I was very frightened about having this baby and having no job to go to and then looking for a job as a mother. I was very worried about that. And I think that was grounded in reality. Having now been a mother for years, it's very difficult to do anything when you have small children. And so I'm glad that I was able to find the job, or at least a really good lead for the job, while I was still pregnant. But I was quite frantic about that. I was very worried, like, what happens when the EI runs out? How will I find a job when I have a 1-year-old? how will I go to interviews? Like I was very concerned. And I guess the only thing I would have done differently is started earlier, going through people, and cut myself a little bit of slack and not been so hard on myself.
It's have been really challenging for you to step out like this, but I'm really glad that everything played out perfectly for you at the end.
It all worked
Now,
out.
when you, yeah, because now when you look back, even at your internship, or maybe that one person who recommended you and asked you to, like, let's have a talk and you can work with us. When these moments were happening, you were still anxious.
Of course, because I'm like I don't know, I'm a realist and I'm practical, and I knew that would have been bad, right? So yeah, it all worked out. It all worked out. So I love my job. It worked out great. Um, but it's very scary not to know what's going to happen next, especially when you're the type of person who likes to know. And when you've always sort of known, well, I'm going to go get another degree and I'm going to go get another degree. And like you've been in that certainty and then suddenly you're not, it's destabilizing.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. The uncertainty of not knowing what's next, that kind of eats you up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So since you have shared, I mean, this is, you have used so less words, but this conversation with you has been filled with so much wisdom, so many emotions, and also this is a very, very interesting, but a very unconventional journey, I would say, that you have shared. So before we end this, I would like you to share something that would have wanted a younger Elissa to know.
I think it would be good to know that people like to help other people. You're not a burden on somebody when you ask them for help. So I teach right now. One of my leadership development courses is about trust and how do you build trust. And one of the easiest ways to build trust with someone is to ask them for their advice. People like to give you advice. People like to be the one to help you. Just think about when someone in your friends is like, I need a recommendation for X. I don't know, something around the house or some kind of service provider. And you're like, oh, I have one. Let me get it for you. And you get that really good feeling. And you're like, I was useful today. When you ask somebody for help with your job trajectory, with learning about them from their experience, they get a good feeling about you because they feel like you respect them. And it's just like, it's not a bad thing. You're not a burden. Genuinely, most people, A, like to talk about themselves, B, like to feel useful. So asking someone for a networking call, asking someone who you know who already knows you, if they can introduce you to somebody else, most of the time that spreads good feeling for the other person and not bad feeling. So don't be afraid to go there.
Thank you so much for sharing this. You made it sound like it's a very positive feedback loop, asking for help, and the other person either helping you directly or indirectly in his or her capability. Because I think this is one thing that most of the grad students are scared of. We are never taught to go out and ask for help.
And as long as you're respectful about it, I don't know, it reflects pretty well. It's fine. Yeah, I just wanted to like announce that I had a job. I didn't want to ask anybody to help me get a job. But in the end, that's how it worked out. Oh, and I mean, I guess I did this, but I saw so many of my colleagues in grad school. Don't cut off your life to everyone outside of grad school. So many of my friends in the PhD had only PhD friends. I really think I would have been lost without a network of people outside of the PhD. So keep your friends. Having friends that do different things will only enrich your life in terms of your experience, your understanding, and then hopefully in your job search if you needed it down the road.
This is I believe is really important because it's not only about being friends with someone just because they are PhDs. Yeah, but I think a lot of grad students have only friends who are grad students, and all they talk about is grad student stuff.
Yes, And like, that's fine. I didn't keep my friends outside of grad school for mercenary reasons, but it only enriches you to have people who have different kinds of lives in your life.
And it's a lot of fun getting to know how other people live.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you so much once again, Elissa, for sharing your story with us. I'm sure it is inspiring on so many levels, and I hope our viewers would also benefit and learn from it. So thank you so much for being with here today.
Oh, thank you. It was my pleasure. Thank you for moderating the conversation. I was glad to be here.
Thank you, Elissa, for your story and your words of wisdom. For our audience, if you like today's episode and want to hear about more career journeys, please click like and subscribe down below. We'll be back with more educational and informative videos to help you with your career transition. Thank you so much.